So my name's George Brown. I can see a number of my clients are in here. So hello to those of you who do know me, and hello and welcome to those of you who don't. If you don't know me, I'm the key account manager here. I look after our bigger accounts, but my background is I've been at the company for nearly 8 years, and I started on the help desk, then I did installations and training, then project management and consultancy, and then eventually moved into account management. So I've been exposed to most bits of the business and most aspects of how we interact with our clients. And over the years, both myself and my colleagues in the various departments have noticed that we regularly get very similar requests from people in terms of training, very similar issues that come up at the help desk, on a daily or a weekly basis, or when we're out visiting clients and we're talking to the users about things that they struggle with or things that irritate them, neither of which are things we want our software to be doing. They're quite often the same things. So the point in this webinar is just to show you a brief overview of, I think it's about 18 or maybe 20 little bits and pieces that crop up all the time, some of which I'm sure you will already know, you will have seen and you know how to fix, but with a bit of luck, hopefully there'll be some bits in here that you can take away and pass on to people within your respective businesses. I expect it's probably going to take about 40 minutes, so it's going to be pretty rapid fire, I would say, on the various issues. Most of them are pretty simple and pretty quick fixes, but if anyone does have any questions or queries as we go through it, please do ask the questions as we go. I'll do my best to notice them and answer them at the time that they come up, but if not, then I will of course be doing a Q&A session at the very end. And on the rapid speed at which I'm going to go through this stuff, obviously I'll try to keep it digestible, but every person who registered for the webinar will be sent a copy of either today's video or yesterday's video so that you can go back and cover bits and pieces at your own leisure. After all of that, I think it's probably about time to start. So I'll just hop into here. Just to reiterate what I'd said on the previous bits, really, we just want you to try to get the most out of the system as you possibly can. And while we're on the subject of obviously you being here and taking some time out of your days to come and listen to these things, if you or your users do have any bits and pieces that irritate you, or you wonder regularly, why isn't there a better way of doing this? The probability is that there is a better way of doing it. And you just need to ask us, really. By all means, contact your account manager, or if it's a little bit more technical, go through support. But if we don't know you've got a problem, then we can't help you fix it. So please do stick your hand up and speak to us about it. So one of the bugbears of my life when I was on the help desk nearly a decade ago now were the Office add-ins. And if you are on a slightly older version of Virtual Cabinet, and just to warn you, I will be banging the upgrade drum a few times in this call, there's quite a lot of stuff that we can do to help you, or that we've stabilized over a long period of time, that you will only get from having the latest versions of VC. So please do upgrade. And if you don't know how or why or anything like that, then support are perfectly happy within working hours to do the upgrade for you. Nowadays, an upgrade on a small database can be done in 15 or 20 minutes of downtime. So just get in touch and let us know. So anyway, over time, we have improved how the add-ins behave themselves. But as administrators, and I'm going to generally assume that the people on this webinar now are either the VC administrators themselves or have a direct influence on the people who do this. So if you are an administrator of VC and someone's add-ins, if you've got a new user who arrives in the business and they don't have any add-ins, obviously the logical thing to do, if you don't know what to do, would be to phone our help desk to ask them to come in and do it. But with the best will in the world, and we do have a very decent help desk, with the best will in the world, you might be waiting 2 or 3 hours for us to get back to that person to sort their add-ins out. Whereas with just a little bit of knowledge, you can do it yourself. And that knowledge essentially is no more complicated than what I'm going to show you on my other screen now. So up here, we will cover a few of these bits and pieces. A lot of people don't even know that this orb thing up in the top left exists, but there are a few bits and pieces in here that you will find useful, and I'll be covering them over the course of this. So basically, all you need to do is click on install add-in, and the add-in should, in theory, then install. Just make sure that all your Office programs are shut before you do it, and then reopen them afterwards and make sure that everything is as it should be. Now, the second bit on my other screen, some of you will probably be aware of. It's the Office add-in do not disable. So with the best will in the world, Microsoft products are not the most easy things to integrate with, and particularly our Outlook add-in, we ask it to do a huge amount of work in quite difficult circumstances. So particularly on older versions of VC, and it has been made much more stable in later versions, we can make it so that Microsoft never disables the add-in. It's not something I can really demonstrate to you, but if you have an issue where add-ins are constantly dropping out, whether that's for one user or the whole of your business, please do get in touch and we can speak to your IT and we can roll out a solution that will significantly ameliorate those problems. I wouldn't want to claim that it will make everything perfect forever. That wouldn't be fair, but it will make a big, big difference. So please do just give us a call. The last two bits on here, which are going to be about the indexing pane and assigning the VC flag to Outlook flags, I will just pop over here and go back into Outlook again. I'll just get you off my live client emails. And then in the indexing pane, all you have to do is go to add-ins, options, general, and then at the top there you've got show indexing pane. For those of you who don't know what an indexing pane is, I will show you. So over here on the right hand side, and I significantly hope, unless you are using automated email capture by subject line or by email address, I really hope that you're using this indexing pane for filing emails, and especially this email conversation bit. But for those of you who do not know what an indexing pane is, that's it on the right hand side, and equally if you want to turn it on from in here, you can just show or hide it using that button. It's really as easy as that. Sometimes people sit there for weeks without it, moaning they can't file any emails, but it is genuinely a 10-second fix. Assigning the VC tag to Outlook flags, as you can see here, and this should also be the case for everybody, both in their inbox and their sent items, there should be a tick box there to show that Virtual Cabinet has captured that email in one way or another. If you don't have that, again, go into your options, email flags, turn on email flags. I'd probably leave that all as default. And then if you've got certain folders that you want those tick boxes to appear on, tick these boxes in here. Some people don't find that that tick box is sufficiently obvious when they log into their Outlook, so they like to apply a category to it. And that is done as simply as ticking that box, picking your favorite color from the drop down, and then saving it. And then thereafter, anything that goes into VC will end up with a little orange tag on it instead of just a tick box. Just a personal preference thing, really. I'm just going to pop back to the other screen. Okay, so this is a bit more of the kind of nitty-gritty of what we want you to do as administrators. And again, we're always happy to do it for you, but I have found over the years that when the better usage you guys get out of Virtual Cabinet, and ultimately in its most basic form, the whole point of it is for you guys to get stuff in there as fast as possible, and then when you need it, to get it back out again as fast as possible. Use it to put a piece of chargeable work together, file that away, get it out to the client, get the cost agreed, and then get paid for doing it. That's all we need you to do, or that's all you need us to do, rather. So anything you can do to drive efficiency internally using Virtual Cabinet, and that usually involves mostly employee engagement and employee competence. The more engaged and competent you guys are as administrators, the more that will filter down to the rest of the business, and hopefully will help you in a roundabout way become more profitable. So that's what we're trying to engage you guys to do here. So I'll just run through these very briefly. Within Virtual Cabinet itself, I might flip back to this screen, but I may not need to. I'll pop back over to here and show you how to do these things as we go. Okay, so I hope once again all of you do have an admin tab. If you don't, and this is stuff that you're anticipating having to do, either speak to an administrator there or give us a shout and we'll sort it out for you. So creating users, there's a couple of ways of doing this. The first is going into view users and just clicking add. That will allow you to create all of these bits and pieces manually. It's all pretty self-explanatory, but as it transpires, a slightly unnecessary use of your time, because there is a bit here immediately underneath which says add users from Active Directory. And what we do there is we go off to your server and we ask it for a list of all users that you've got on your domain who don't have an active Virtual Cabinet account. That's excellent. That's because I'm not on the domain. Typical, sorry. Right, so it'll give you a list of all the active domain users on your account, and it will also, if this doesn't work, I'll have to give it to you in theory. Right, so it'll give us a list here in that box, like so, and then over here on the right-hand side, it will ask you who you want to base that user on. And generally speaking, when new starters come in, they will be joining an existing team of people, or they will be replacing somebody who, for whatever reason, has left that team. So you can select that person that they are going to pick their name in here, and then all you need to do is click add users, and then VC will duplicate one user, call it the other user's name, and then they'll be able to log in immediately thereafter with all the relevant access rights, and you not having to add them to any groups or anything like that. It just does it all in the background for you. You may have seen in here when we were looking at the manual side of things on password resets. Now, I would generally advise you to have automatic logon turned on for VC. Just while we're on that subject, I will show you where that is. Up here, users, and then that will say enable automatic logon if they don't have it. It will save people putting their passwords in every time they try to go into VC. And it's not a security issue, because what we do is we go back off to your server, your domain controller, and make sure that the user is logged into Windows as themselves. So we take the view that if they know what the Windows login, username and password are, then it's okay for them to come into VC with the Windows username and password. So we'll just log them in automatically. So some people prefer not to do that. They prefer effectively two-factor authentication to get into VC with Windows and VC itself. So if you do make your users log in manually, either they can reset their own password here, but obviously they'll need to be inside VC to do that, or you as an administrator can come in here and reset their password for them. All you need to do is type in the password into that box, click OK. They can log in with this username at the top and that new password, and then when they're in, they can change their password themselves. I think security profile settings are something that come up a lot, and it's something that I don't think people, sometimes there's no business case for it, and there's no point reinventing the wheel just because you've got toys there to play with. But I think security profiling, generally speaking, is something that's underused at sites I go to. Quite often, even at 200-300 user sites, they take the view that if someone's doing one piece of work for one client, they should be able to see every single document for every single client, which is, in my mind, a little slapdash, but it's up to each individual. But what we can do in VC, and again, I hope you're aware of this, is we can set security profiling at everything from cabinet, document type, section value, client code, client name, member of staff, managing partner, and all the way down to individual document level, based on pretty much anything that you can have in VC. And most of that can be automated. Some of it gets really, really complicated, and I think in most businesses' cases, that's not entirely necessary. I think once you get up to sort of verging on enterprise level, that's a bit more relevant. But for most of our clients, sort of the 1 to 30 user level, You probably do want all of your staff to be able to see all of your client documents, but equally you may have HR cabinets, staffing and partner cabinets, IT cabinets, which obviously no particular users need to be able to see. So we've made it very, very simple for you to be able to manage security profiles. I'm just going to use an HR general one here as a case in point. So all I've done is I've created this, called it HR general, and then in here I've got groups of people who can access it and then individual users under here. I'm going to cover groups very, very quickly just in scope of what they are and how they work. So if you don't use groups, every time someone needs access to or having their access removed from a particular cabinet or security profile, you're going to have to come in here and individually tick any of these boxes that are relevant to that particular user. Now, it's perfectly possible that there will be a use case for this particular person to have read rights and not be a member of these groups. So we allow that flexibility, but to try to make your lives as easy as possible, we've got this concept of groups, which are here. And I've got an HR team, and I give that HR team access to that filing cabinet or to that security profile, which then applies to particular areas of virtual cabinet. And all I need to do is add and remove people from the groups, and VC will go away and set up the relevant security for those people as soon as you add them to that group. Security can get complicated, so if you've got anything weird and funky to ask, probably best to speak to your account manager about that. They should know what's going on. And then we can go from there. The next thing I've got on my list, which I think will be of some benefit to quite a lot of people, is managing lists and setting defaults for indexes. When I'm speaking to users about training them on VC, I tend to advise them that they can click on just about anything, and the probability of them doing any serious damage, as long as their access rights have been set up properly, is really, really very, very small. As administrators, there are a couple of places that I would advise you to tread carefully in, and index definitions is most definitely one of them. This, in case you've never seen it before, is where we set up each of the different indexes of VC itself. So it looks much more complicated than it is, but if you start adding and removing stuff from in here, it can cause some issues. So if you're worried about it, don't do it. Simple as that, really. But there are a couple of things in here that I think you ought to be aware of, because I think your staff will probably thank you for it. So the first is, I'm going to go through, is adding and removing stuff from lists. People often have a year list. So when I used to set VC up for people, I would always add a year list in, because it's just a quicker way of segregating documents from one another, rather than having to do a date range search from 1st of January to the 31st of December 2018 or whatever it may have been. So I prefer to be able to go in there and go, right, I need all of John Smith's documents relating to accounts from the year 2019, and as long as they've all been indexed properly, which I will show you a helping thing for in a second, as long as they've all been indexed properly, every document should immediately come back, and it's just a much faster search for me. I tend to take the view that we'll take the big wins where we can, but if we can find a few mouse clicks here and there that we can replicate 50 times across your business every single day, and over the course of the year, you should see ultimately some pretty decent financial returns off of that. So this is one of those. So quite a lot of people have year lists, and obviously when we do the installation, we'll go in and we'll put 20, if you were installed in 2015, we probably put 15, 16, 17 into your lists, so that you didn't have to go back and do that yourselves for a few years. But obviously, all being well, and you stayed with us for a longer period than that, you or your staff will want to go in and change that year, because we'll set a default for 2015. I've been to places where nobody has known that they can change that, and people have sat there for 5 years manually changing 2015 to the corresponding year that they are in, because no one's bothered to phone us and say, this is insanity, can we sort it out, please? So this is how you would do that. You have years, calendars, you just come in here, find your values. If you want to add one, add one. And if you want to remove one, that is as complicated as it gets, adding and removing stuff from lists. Okay. Now, the problem at that point is getting the staff to actually put those things into that list. and this, getting things from that list and putting them against the index. So what we do is we take that need away from them. So in your indexing defaults, what I've done is I've added, or I've got an index called year, and in there I can pick which list it goes to get its values, and then in here I can say which year I want it to default in as from the start. And that can be applied to any index. It doesn't have to be year. It's just that's the one that tends to relate to most of the different verticals that we deal with. So all you have to remember now, every member of staff that you have will have 2020 put in there. Obviously, if they're filing documents from 2019, they can override it. That's no problem at all. And then in January, all you need to do is come in and click that to 2021, and then you're away for another year. Another thing in indexing defaults that people like to save time with is the document date. So again, this will depend on your use case in your business, but if you are someone who does a lot of new documents, creating Word documents on the fly, probably less relevant for scanning because that usually comes in by post and is a couple of days behind the document date. But we can default it in so that every time you create a brand new document, when you go to file it, today's date will default in as the document date. You don't have to use it, but it's there if you want it. And then this one, the last one that I'm going to talk about, and probably the most popular of the lot, is this original file name default for the description. So it's original file name, all in capital letters, all one word. And what that does is it defaults the name of the document in as the description without you having to. So where this probably comes into its best is if I've got a bunch of documents. So I've got 5 there, let's say, 4, all the different file names. If I wanted to get all of those into VC at once, obviously all I have to do is go right click, send to, and then pick one of those 3 options there. Now, in the bad old days, if I'd have gone index, which I will do now, if I'd have gone index, it doesn't let me segregate between the different documents to give them different descriptions, or at least under normal circumstances it wouldn't. So I'd have to put them all into VC and everything would go in with the same description, which is less than optimal, shall we say. So what we do now is we put that original file name thing into that default, and then when we pull these documents into VC, because they're all for the same client code, they're all for the same client name, default year is 2020, default date is today, and then description has gone in, and it will be each of those with its own name as opposed to the same name for each of them. So that, I think, is probably about all I have to say on this particular slide. As I warned you previously, I do have upgrade written on there. A lot of the stuff that I've talked about there isn't available in the later versions, so do let us know if you need an upgrade. Right. So next screen. Okay, these are a little bit more niche, I would say, but for people who are struggling with these things, it will be hopefully mind-blowing how much time it's going to save you, particularly the first 2. The last one I just tagged on there because I didn't have anywhere else to put it. But the template one, if you don't use, well, if you use document creation, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. If you don't, I'll just give you a very quick overview. So document creation is where you have a number of standard letters that you send out to clients. I mean, in here, I'll show you what I've got. I've got like aid memoirs, standard business letters. That's better. Aid memoirs, standard letters, letters of engagement, all that sort of stuff. So these are documents that you create regularly, the content of which is broadly the same, but what you don't want to have to do, and generally speaking, people don't use something like this, whether it's ours or someone else's, is they'll have a whole load of templates on a Windows folder drive somewhere, Windows drive in a folder, and people will just go in there and mess about with them, and it drives people slightly mad because they never know what they're supposed to be working from and so on. You've got a standard letter here in my preview pane. It's got client partner, client department, document author, all that sort of stuff. So we go off to the third-party piece of software, be that Iris or CCH or whatever, and we pull in all of this information and create the letter for you and file it in VC. Now, the bit that people often don't remember, what happens is when we install this for you, we'll put a few in there for you, we'll show you how to do it, and then someone else will come along and they'll put in any other letters. You know, from your end, someone will come and put in any letters that that need to go in there for use by everybody. So what people often forget is in here in template settings, let me just show you what happens when I create a letter. So I'll go in here, it's got my letter there, it asks me who the client is, I click on the client, it gets all of their bits of information, and then it puts that information into the letter. Now, when you haven't set up this bit that I'm about to show you, when you've created the letter, you close it and it says, do you want to save it to Virtual Cabinet? You say, yes, I do. And then it asks you for all your filing information again. Now, as a normal user, you'd be looking at it going, well, I've just given you who the client is. You know it's an aide memoir. Why am I being bothered to give you filing information for something that you already have? And obviously, I couldn't agree with you. What you have to do, or what an administrator have to do, is come in here and it will show you where you want these things to default to. So I know it's an accountancy document, I know it's correspondence, I know the client code is the client code, the name is the name, that's the description, the year I can default in if I want to, and the document date will be today. And then you click this, enable automatic indexing underneath, and you're away. And then all you have to do is create the letter, fill it in and close it, and then VC will automatically put it where you need it to be. Okay, the last bit on this is going to be the hot folder. Again, I don't know how many people here use the hot folder. You will find it hopefully on your desktop is a little sort of chest of drawers number there, and that's what it is. It's just a filing cabinet essentially that you can drop stuff into. If you don't have one of these, or your users don't have one of those, there is a button here that says open hot folder. That will create a hot folder on your desktop, create the shortcut in your taskbar, and do a few other bits and pieces behind the scenes to make the whole thing work. But what the hot folder is, essentially, is just a Windows folder on your desktop that is sitting there waiting for you to drop documents into it for VC to then pick up. And I think off the top of my head, probably the best use case for the bit that I'm talking about now, configuring the hot folder, is if you are something like a payroll company and you produce a whole stack of payroll reports for a given client to send out to them. You know, there might be 4 or 5 Excel spreadsheets and PDFs and things like that that get spat out by your payroll system. And then when you get them, you need to drop them into VC. So essentially, the hot folder just sits there. You take these 5 documents as they're created, export them directly. You don't have to go via the desktop for this. You can go directly into the hot folder as it appears, hopefully, somewhere in your list. No, mine isn't there typically. It will appear on that list on the left-hand side, so you can just save to it straight from Excel or straight from the payroll program. Now, on its default, when you drop five documents into the hot folder, what happens when you drop one in? I'll show you. VC grabs it and then it says, what do you want to do with that document? As it happens, I'm going to want to file that one. But you'll have noticed there was really quite a short response time there. So if I drop 5 documents into that, VC waits 1.5 seconds, and then anything that's in there, it grabs and asks you what to do with it. If the remaining 3 documents never made it in the time that VC was waiting, they will just sit there and then you'll have to go through the whole process again. And if you are, and I know what payroll departments are like, they're usually pretty busy, pretty stressed, and don't need any grief. If you're doing that 50 times a day on a payday, pay run day, then you're going to be a seriously unhappy person. So what you can do is tweak those settings by right-clicking on the hot folder down here, a little miniature version of the one on my desktop. Click on Preferences, and then it's got a whole bunch of stuff in here that you can change. Excuse me. The relevant one for you guys on here is probably what you want to do with it. I should probably have mine set to index directly to Virtual Cabinet because that's all I ever do. Your users should probably do the same depending on what they need it for. And then in advanced, there is a thing here that says period of time before sending starts, milliseconds. So if your people are finding that stuff isn't getting picked up and it's just sitting there and causing them issues, come in here and pump them up to 4.5 seconds or 3.5 seconds, whatever the sweet spot is that makes sure that everything is in there, but doesn't mean that they're sitting there for 30 seconds waiting for something to happen in the background. Find your sweet spot, click save, and you are away. The last bit I'm going to show you, and I can't actually show it to you because you can't see where I am or my scanner, is we get this a phenomenal amount of times on the help desk. When you plug a scanner into your laptop or your desktop, you plug it into a particular USB port, and then when you take away the laptop somewhere else, and then you come home again, or you go back to the office or wherever it is that you are at the moment, when you plug the USB cable back in, if you don't plug it back into the same port, BC doesn't know where it's supposed to be looking. So the scanner stops working, you phone the help desk get on, they fix it, but you might be waiting again 2 or 3 hours for them to do that, when actually, as an administrator, if you come into the scanning profile of that person, either you tell them to plug it back into the same hole, in which case it will just start working, again, or you can come in here and that will say number 1 unavailable or something like that. There'll be a drop down, click the drop down, the next one underneath that won't have unavailable, select that, save it, close it, and then that person's scanner will be working immediately. So a very, very quick and easy one, but if we get fewer than 500 calls a year on that, I'd be very, very surprised. Okay, back to the slides. Okay, again, this auto open on index stuff in the intro, this drives people mad for years, and this fix is so simple that it's almost depressing. I think in later versions of VC, like the last 2 or 3, I think this is disabled by default, but for the first 10 years, for reasons unknown to me, this was on by default. So if you have a load of documents here in your intro, and you go to file one, and simple drag and drop. If you have auto open on index ticked, i.e. like that, what happens is you fill in the filing information, you tick go, VC files the document, and then it opens it. And then 99% of the time, that's not what you want, so you have to close it again. And if you're someone doing this filing of the scanning, and you're banging through 50 or 60 of these in the morning, and you're having to close 60 documents, it's not going to make your morning a happy one, I wouldn't say. So if you do have people with this issue, all they need to do is make that not orange, and the issue will go away. We'll just flip back to this slide again. So on adding columns to the task in tray, again, really easy. I'll show you that in a second. And creating groups and group in trays. I kind of already touched on groups. Group in trays is, again, really easy to set up. And intro reports I'll come to last of all. So get back to here again. If you are someone who uses tasks, you don't have this stuff ticked, and it should really be by default. The problem is that we don't know exactly what your indexes are going to be depending on which industry you're working in or what you use your tasks for. But if you are, well, in this case, put it this way, I'm a member of the management team, and I've been asked to approve a whole load of documents and been given a whole load of stuff to do. But all I can see from here is who has sent them to me and when they did it, or priorities and things like that. I actually have no clue what these tasks are for unless I go into them individually, which, even with 10, that would be a pain. I wouldn't want to do it with 30 or 40. So what we have got is the ability for you to add certain indexes to the tasks. So here now, I've immediately got a list of who the clients are, at least, who I'm working on these tasks for. So someone phones me and says, I've just sent you a task to approve a document for Ben Oliver. I can go in here, and without having to mess about too much, I can just immediately go to the relevant task. That's that one. On group in trays, these can be useful where you have, a team of people who work off a batch of documents, and where you don't want someone going off on holiday and their team not having access to their in trays, which I can show you a little workaround for in a second, actually. If you want kind of universal availability without having to mess about in the background, then a group in tray is probably the thing you're looking for. And all you need to do is go to the group, and then where it's got in tray, you click enabled and click OK. and then that will create a group in tray for anyone who is a member of that group will be able to add and remove documents from that in tray. Nobody else will know that. And the in tray security thing, if someone does go off, and this is a relatively new addition as well, I think this came out in 4.1 or 4.2. If someone is on holiday or they go on maternity leave or anything along those lines, and someone needs access to their in tray, it used to be, again, back in the bad old days, that you would have to come into here as an admin, go into that user's profile, reset their password, log in as them, give people access to their in tray, and then carry on as normal. But we have now made it so that you as an administrator can come in and go, right, I need Dave to have access to George's in tray, bang, 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 save and close, and you're done. So that should save some time on that side of things. In tray reports, I would hope all the administrators have got access to these reports. I would also, particularly around the portal reporting, if you use the portal, you should be using the reporting where you can, because I mean, I use this every day, the action status of stuff that I've sent out and things that I'm waiting on. So spend a little bit of time familiarising yourself with the reports, but for the purposes of this, it's just the in-tray reports that I'm interested in. Very quick and easy way of seeing who in the business has got lots and lots of stuff in their in-tray. You, as a senior member of the business or the owner of a business, you don't want your client sending stuff in and then someone sitting on it for 3 months and the client not knowing what's going on. So ideally, in-trays should be held as temporary holding areas for documents that you might want to keep hold of for maybe a day or 2 days. It should be really, really transitional. If you need access to documents after they've been filed, you should be using shortcuts or tasks, I would say. Don't just sit here with stuff in your in tray. I've been to big firms where partners might have 3,500 documents in their in tray, and nobody has a clue what's going on. And of course, as for the business, if you have your business hat on, that's quite a significant risk, because if they retire or they decide that they want to leave the business or whatever the case may be, you suddenly find yourself with 6 months of headache to unpick at a very senior level of the business, and you just don't need it. So keep an eye in here. As with everything in VC, you can sort by clicking on the top of a column. So you can go like that and see who has what in each of their in trays. I don't have a particular guide for you, but and it will depend on what people's jobs are and what they're doing, but anything nudging up towards 100, I would say, is an alarm bell that starts ringing for me. Okay, back to here. Got a couple of bits on searching. A couple of these are really more to do with training than administration, but I have found that, I'll say this slightly hesitantly, but I found that when I've been to visit people on site, which I used to do an awful lot of, the general frustrations are that they can't find stuff fast enough. And again, I would like to say generally that's an issue with training rather than with the software itself. People just don't know how to search properly. You wouldn't go to a filing cabinet and tip 1,000 documents on the floor and then just start sifting through them randomly, hoping to find one that you were looking for, because it would be insane. But when you watch what people do when they search in VC, quite often that is precisely what they are doing, and then they get irritated by it. So I'm just going to show you a couple of bits at the end of this slide on things that might make some users happier with a very minimal amount of input from your side, and make them happier. But there's a couple of other bits that are a bit less well known, and I'll go through those first. Just before I get into favoriting packs and stuff, on that subject of dumping 1,000 documents on the floor, one thing I would be very, 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 very hesitant about in your shoes is having a high number of maximum search results. There are certain circumstances where it makes sense, but generally speaking, I would say if you're returning more than 1,000 results, you're probably not searching well enough. In really, really large businesses with really high volume documents, that's relevant. But I think it's worth bearing in mind that every time you do a search in VC, whatever it's for, if you do a blank search, for example, you've got maximum search results of 5,000, you might think it's bringing back 5,000 documents, which it is, but it's also bringing back probably 40 or 50 pieces of information about each of those documents. So 40 times 5,000, you're looking at bringing back the best part of 250,000, more than that, ignore that, a huge number of documents, of pieces of information, just little bits out of the database. Each column and each row is something that we have to do in the background to return it to that user. So the lower you can have this number, the less stress you're putting on the server. So if you've got 20 people who are searching all at the same time, and each of them are bringing back millions of pieces of information, your server's not going to thank you. And because the users are having a worse experience, they're not going to thank you either. So my encouragement would be to knock that down to a sensible level and teach people how to search a little bit better. One thing we have found in recent years is as we've started adding automated archiving and automated document retention into the product, these cabinets have much less stuff in them. If you've had a client for 15 years and you've been a client of ours for 15 years, when you do a blank search on that client, it is going to return a ton of documents. But equally, if you have a year field in there, then you're only returning a certain number of years. If you have archiving on, then you're only going to have 2 years worth of documents within that cabinet anyway. So you can only bring back a finite amount of documents, not the previous 13 years worth of dross that you just have to keep because you have no choice in the matter. Okay, so that's my rant about maximum search results over. I will go back to favoriting packs now. I'm just going to do a blank search, which is the opposite of everything I just said to you guys, but I'm allowed. Okay, so I hope people are using packs. If you have no concept of what a pack is, it's just a method of effectively paper clipping, which is what these paper clips are over there. Paper clipping a bunch of documents together that otherwise you might find more difficult to get together in one place. So if I use a tax return as an example, and you've got a cover letter, which is filed in correspondence, you've got a tax return, which is filed in tax returns, some schedules, which are in supporting documentation, and a fee note, which is held under invoicing. You can look on that client, you can look at this year's documents, but actually getting those 4 documents on one screen together is a bit of a pain. So what we did is we created this concept of these things called packs. So you just go right click, packs, new pack, and then you can call it whatever you want. Now, when you have a pack of documents which is relevant to more than one client, so if you're an IFA doing work for a husband and wife, both of whom have different client codes, but whose documents are relevant to both of them, you will need to do a search for, let's say, the husband, add in a bunch of documents to a pack. But then when you go and do a search for the wife, because none of those documents are relevant to her, the pack won't appear. So you won't be able to add documents to it. What you can do is you can favorite the pack. So by clicking the star, and then thereafter, when you do a search on anything, the pack that you were working on will appear here at the top. So what I would tend to advise people to do is go into the husband, add the documents to a pack, favorite it, search on the wife, add the documents to the pack, unfavorite it, and then you're away. Anytime you do a search on either the husband or the wife, then that pack will appear because they've got documents, they've both got documents within that one pack. Another thing which went down surprisingly well yesterday in, the webinar was VC Portable. As you may or may not know, we have an app now which is designed so that you can take a tablet or a phone or something to a client, in the good old days anyway, and be able to show them documents from your VC without having to take them off site with you. Sometimes that isn't going to be appropriate because the volume of documents is too great that you're trying to take out, and you don't want to have to sit there and perform 15 manual searches to bring back the documents your client's after, or maybe they want copies of these documents. So what we did is we created this thing called VC Portable, which is a method by which you can take documents out of Virtual Cabinet. We put them into kind of a miniature version of Virtual Cabinet, and then you can password protect them and encrypt them. So what you do to do that is select the documents you want, go extract. The bit underneath is where you build the folder structure. That's not what I'm interested in at the moment, because I don't want to put it into Windows folders. I want to use the Virtual Cabinet Portable application. I will put encryption on it, and I will extract it. Okay, very quick and easy. And then what happens on the other end is you come in here, there's today's exports. In here are the documents, but none of those will open. So it's unreadable document, basically. So fill that off, and then in this one, you've got this thing called VC Portable. Open. So that opens VC Portable, and as you can see, it is basically like a tiny version of VC. You can still put your filters in. They're all letters, so that's not going to do anything. Put your filters in, you can take stuff out of here, open it, delete it, exit it, and then if you then take that memory stick away with you, what the client does, if someone loses it, because everything's encrypted, there's been no breach of confidentiality because no one can get into those documents. In terms of usability, again, I think I'll go for the last one on my other slide, reset the GUI or the column layout. We found, depending on how people are using it, sometimes they just get themselves into a bit of a mess, and they accidentally do stuff like moving this into the middle of here or something like that, and then something else and undocking it from something else, and it just becomes horrible. Or sometimes they'll have this one, the preview on the second screen over there somewhere, and then they can't get it back again, something along those lines. But rather than trying to manually set everything back to where it can be, which can be a bit fiddly, there is an option in here called Reset Save Window Layout Positions, and that will, after a restart of VC, put everything back to where it was. And the same goes for when people have had a bit of a mess about with their column headings and setting their layouts in here. You can come in here and go reset save column positions, which I'm not going to do because I like mine, but you can then go back in and everything should be back to normal again. Right. And finally, and I hope and pray that everybody here is aware of both of these things, but this is the searching side of things. Some of this may not be absolutely relevant depending on what your integrations are like, because the digital integration is very specific, although this still works there. IO integration is very specific, but I'll just for argument's sake and for this webinar's relevance, I'm just going to search within VC itself. And again, this depends on what your role is in the business and what you feel most comfortable with. With VC, there's often 2 or 3 or 4 different ways of doing exactly the same thing. It just depends on how you feel as an individual while you are doing it. So, for example, on things like the search results layout, in my experience, I have found that people at kind of partner level prefer to do a search and then flick through the front pages of the document so that they can find exactly what they're looking for visually. And I found that, I'm generalizing grossly here, but I found that sort of admin and secretarial type people prefer to have the split screen so they can do searches, use the text and the grouping that I'll come to in a second here, also see what they're doing here. And probably the least popular is this one. You have to really like your data to want to sit on this one. But it is there if you want to set. My preference is probably this middle one. But again, I wouldn't want, I've got 248 results there, I wouldn't want to sit through 248 results trying to find the front page of the document I was after. So personally, I would do some searches over here on the right-hand side and then filter them further down with the keyword search at the top. But on the assumption that the theoretical user we're discussing now can't be bothered to do any of that, probably the easiest way for them to sort their stuff out is by grouping and filtering. So to group, you just grab a column header and drop it there. That then groups everything by document type. You can right click to collapse all groups. It then shows you where each of those 248 documents are. If I know that what I'm looking for is in tax, I can then get that there, and then I can use the filter in here if I want something to do with the portal. And then that will just show me all the documents for that client within tax that are portal responses. So within, what have I done there? 3-4 mouse clicks and a couple of key types. I've got exactly what I wanted, which is, I hope you'll agree, significantly faster than trawling through all of this stuff here. So just a little tip or trick really, as opposed to anything administrators should do, but hopefully it will have benefited someone. Okay, back to the main screen. That's it. End of lesson. Is that 50 minutes, near enough? Not too bad. Okay, I hope that was useful for everybody. I know it's a lot to take in, and we sort of breeze through pretty much everything, but please do take the time to have a look back through it if you wish. And if you have any questions or things you need clarifying or things that you want to know, really, either ask them now or ask them directly of me. My contact details are there. I hope you know who your account manager is, if it isn't me, or especially if it's me. But if you don't, contact me. I'll find out who they are, and I will get them to speak to you about whatever the query is. If it's desperately technical, I might answer it myself, but we'll see where we end up. But yeah, if no one has any specific questions, then I will end it there. Thank you very much for your time, and have a lovely rest of week and weekend. Cheers, everybody.